Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning to everyone. You're welcome to today's session. I am very, very delighted to have you here. Every one of us, very, very delighted to have you here. Please, you can hear me, do that by showing thumbs up with your beautiful emojis and all. Okay, thank you very much. We're very, very much delighted to have you here. You're welcome to today's session. My name is Chinonso. I am yeah, you're welcome. Good morning from Nigeria. Good morning from Ghana. I don't know what time it is at Kenya and every other place, but you're welcome to today's session. I am my word is a bit of background noise.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
So, as I was saying, you're welcome to today's session. You guys are just going to have to, wait so that we can get to a certain number so that we can start. Currently we're like 28 participants on this call. So, yes.
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Maya.
Yeah, good morning, Chino. So, Bamdele is on the call today. I'm also expecting Anne on the call, and I'm excited this morning to be starting a new week. Tracy, I'll allow you to speak very soon. So let me just do a roll call. Our facilitator is already on the call. We are really excited to be entering this new week. A lot has happened in the past few weeks, and once again, I want to celebrate each and every one of you for being able to join us in the 7th week of the fellowship, Zero Carbon Africa Impact Fellowship. In one word, so as usual, we'll be using the Q&A feature of Zoom to, ask a specific question, and then you can use the chat feature for general comments. So in one word, how was your weekend? How would you say your weekend was? For me, my weekend was busy. Yeah, not busy in the usual sense. I had some outdoor activity to attend to, and we also did some activity relating to the World Cleanup Day on Saturday. Yes. So Favor says that his weekend was great. Okay. All right. Okay. So quick one. If you've not renamed your Zoom name, it's important that you do that now. We'll start in a few seconds. Our facilitator is already on the call. Okay. So Ladislaus, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that name wrongly. Ladislaus says that, okay, busy doing assignments. Okay. Someone said the weekend was really cool. Okay. I hope you know there's a difference between cool and chilled. If it was raining all through, maybe the right word would have been chilled. Well, it's nice. I welcome each and every one of us again. We are about to kickstart. So a quick run down. We've had 6 courses so far. Last week, we had a discussion on the economic implications of climate change, and we're able to have Mr. Kofona Muyunda, take the session and really, really chat us in another direction. So we've been seeing climate change in terms of the disasters and the misery, and somehow we've not also been, as a continent, we've not been able to get the much needed funds, either in our domestic economy or internationally, right? We've not had that flow of funds, coming in, to rebuild cities and things like that, and then Sakuna told us, to always present the business case as we seek to address climate change. This week is more like a build-up of what we started last week. In a few minutes, we'll be hearing from our facilitator, Olumide Idowu, popularly called Olumide Climate, popularly called Mr. Climate, and so many things, right? Yeah, good morning, sir. Good morning, sir Olumide. It's nice to have you here this morning, joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Can I ask if you're in the country right now? If you're in Nigeria, but I know it's
Yes,
either you're.
I'm in the country. I'm in the country.
All right, sir. Thanks so much. It's nice to have you here. Our students are, or we are, of course, because I would each and every one of us are students here, are from higher institutions in 6 countries: Rwanda, South Africa, Zambia, Kenya, Nigeria, and Ghana. So from 3 sub-regions in Africa, and most of us are currently in our undergraduate program. Some of us are in our postgraduate programs. Others are interested in all these stories, and of course, with climate change being a reality these days, so many people are getting interested, and that's the reason why, I mean, some of us are on the call. So I want to say a few things about our facilitator. Am I still audible? If I'm still audible, please let's use the emoji to give a sign or something.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. This is, yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Respect that. So Olumide Idowu is a Nigerian climate change champion. He advocates for environmental consciousness and champions a balanced approach to development and environmental conservation. He's equally passionate about development as is about climate change and environmental conservation efforts. His conservation work spans across various platforms. He has been actively involved in climate change advocacy for the last 12 years and is strategically positioned to engage younger and older generation through his articles, active participation in climate change groups, and the use of social media, where he's popularly known as Mr. Climate. Through the years, he has worked with the corporates, the media, and has managed culturally and nationally diverse teams. He has volunteered in social change initiative and mentored and worked as a strategist for various private and public institutions. Olumide Idowu is the co-founder of the International Climate Change Development Initiative, a non-governmental institution that seeks to grow climate-smart generations across Africa while addressing gaps in development. He's also the youth focal point in Nigeria for UNDP Small Grants Program, Youth Lead, also Global Environmental Outlook, and the Executive Director for Africa Youth Initiative, is the Executive Director for African Youth Initiative on Climate Change. Mr. Olumide is an alumnus of the International Visitor Leadership Program to the United States of America, and is also an Atlas Cup fellow. There's so many. So I know personally that Mr. Olumide in I mean, even before this year has had so many international and local recognition, and really, really honored that he's been able to create time, because he's actually passionate about this, and he has shown from his being on this call, even right on the clock. Let us all welcome Mr. Olumide Idowu as he takes on the mic to facilitate on the course planning for climate change in African cities. You're welcome, Mr. Idowu. Good morning again. Good morning.
Thank
Good
you.
morning. Let's keep jamming those hands. Let's keep expressing with emojis. Let's keep clapping, 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 clapping. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for being on the call, taking this course for us. Over to
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my brother, for that wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. And also let me quickly appreciate the ACF initiative for bringing me on board today. And I'm very sure that most of us on this call, we are not new to the issue that is facing us as a country and as a continent in Africa, which is a very devastating problem that we are seeing. This topic actually came in at the right time when a country like Nigeria, and I'm sure some other countries, Libya, Morocco, is facing a very, very devastating period. And it's also a very big, call to all world leaders or to African leaders, and even the younger generation, even the climate activists, advocates, entrepreneurs, innovators, investors, to see that there's what we call climate action. And there is a very need for us to start looking at how can we make this, or how can we build together a sustainable future for us all. Once again, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to, speak to my friends, my colleagues on this call, on the little that I know about this issue of climate-related conversation when we talk about planning for a sustainable city or planning for climate change in African city. I just want to quickly start by saying that if you are a climate denier on this call, meaning that you don't believe that there is what we call climate change, and if you don't believe that, I will just quickly say to you that if you have ever watched a TV and see where flooding happens, if you ever watch a TV or a news and hear of hurricane, volcano, earthquake, then you should change your mindset today to know that climate change is not a joke. Climate change is very, very real. And if we don't take urgent action, it's going to be a big problem for not only us, but for upcoming generation. So what I'll be looking at today about planning for climate change in African city. A lot of us know that the issue of climate change is something that is very, very important for even the younger generation. We say teach them from the grassroots. We need to understand. And we need to also understand the concept of what is climate change is happening to us. What kind of city are we seeing ourselves? What kind of atmosphere do we find ourselves? Everybody listening to me now, where you are sitting down presently, God forbid bad thing, if anything happened to the environment you find yourself, is it that the internet cut off? Is it that you can't hear me again? Is it that we can't get your feedback on what we are talking about because something have changed in the process? And that is why the issue of climate change, the issue of city, the issue of mobilization, the issue of sustainability is very, very key when we talk about what we are saying today. And the goal is to provide you all with a knowledge, to understand the kind of city we expose ourselves to see that we need to sensitize ourselves on the issue of climate change and how our city can actually be managed, and how this impact is facing a lot of diverse of people, whether you are old, whether you are young, whether you are beautiful, whether you are handsome, whether you are staying in rural or you are staying in urban, no matter anywhere you find yourself, whether male or female, this affects everybody, even the rich and the poor, all are all affected. So it is very, very important for us as upcoming generation, as the one that we find ourselves in now, and where we want to see ourselves, to start looking at how can we build a sustainable city across Africa. And I will quickly share some key points with you this morning, which I know most of you already have this kind of understanding, but we just try to put some perspective into what we are looking at today. As we all know that climate change, it's a continued impact on the planet and the people. And it is very, very important, crucial for us as a city, as an African city, to look at a sustainable planning, or how to prepare for the challenges that we are all facing or that lies ahead of us as a continent. And it's vulnerable community as well. So it's very, very important. And even the ecosystem have faced a lot of damage from the climate space that we find ourselves. And when we talk about cities, we are talking about where you and I are presently located now. People that have experienced increase in temperature, people that have experienced more frequency in terms of droughts in the northern side of the country or another side of the African continent. A lot of sea level rise, people cities staying on the water level is causing a lot of havoc. And we need to start looking at what are the important, or what are the concrete steps, or how do we prepare, and how do we make sure that our African city, or how do we make sure that our city is being taken care of? How do we adapt or even mitigate the effect of this climate change? Because the major key role that we need to be looking at is the planning strategy. How do we make sure that this issue of Africa, or the city in Africa, is a crucial step forward, to make sure we can ensure a better future for both of you and I, and even the environment that we find ourselves. I've already mentioned people living anywhere you are living now, whether it's urban or rural, you have to see this as an urgent action. You see a lot of pollution, you see a lot of car pollution everywhere. How do we keep sustainable? It's very, very important, because most of us as citizens, as people, we are not looking at the other side effects of how this thing can affect us. How do we look at our urban planning and design? A lot of people, let me say, I don't want to blame the government so much, but let us put a context that they have the sole responsibility as well to put a policy or a law that will guide the planning and design of the community. And it is high time for us to see how we can incorporate climate change into urban planning and design processes. That is one thing we need to put at the back of our mind. In any actions that you are working, in any programs that you find yourself, try as much as possible to see how you can integrate green spaces, to try to and see how you can plant trees that will be sustainable. I'm not talking of tree planting that will not see the day of the light in the following 2 weeks. We're talking about how can we reduce heat effects in our environment. So when we build the urban planning processes and design for a city that want to assess sustainability, then we need to find ourselves to see that we are promoting effective building designs. You see a lot of developers across the continent now building houses with low cost production. And you know that we have a lot of population in this entire Africa. And we need to start looking at how can we start decreasing energy consumption, because the way we consume energy in Africa is very, very much. And we are telling ourselves that we are vulnerable. But how do we start adapting to look at, updating our infrastructure so that it will better cope with the increase of flooding that we see finding there? Example of what happened in Nigeria and Lagos State yesterday. Some other states in Nigeria that rain was falling from night of Saturday till almost Sunday morning. So it is, and everywhere was flooded, not only in Nigeria, in different countries that we find ourselves. See what is happening in Libya. Is a case of planning and designing. We need to start looking at that. It's very, very important, because one of the impact of good city that we need to look at is the flooding issue and the sea level rise. And you see a lot of people, the way they dispose their waste is another issue that we need to talk about. It's very, very crucial that improper waste management is key for you and I, because nobody is left behind in the issue of taking care of our waste. It's very, very key, because if we don't do that, then we find ourselves in a place whereby we will not be able to understand what is happening to us. And that is why you see, when flood happens, it's not only taking away your property, it also causes health-related problem, psychological problem. What you've worked for years, you start asking yourself, how did this happen? Why? Because, and this includes how we can start looking to enhance our water conservation. It's very, very important. Government, citizen representation, we need to start looking at how can we invest in how to harvest our rainwaters and build a proper storage infrastructure so that everybody that is involved on planet or Earth will be able to understand that implementing effective irrigation method can help us to reduce water waste in different aspects, whether in agriculture, whether in the local community that we find ourselves. It will be more effective, and we'll be able to understand that this action, this contribution that we are putting as a citizen is actually helping us to build a sustainable future for ourselves. I see a lot of people want to make impact. But before I go on, in as much as we are planning for a sustainable city or planning for an African city that is just, let me say it that there's what we call investment opportunity. As much as we are making the environment more sustainable, you'll be thinking about how can you also make an investment. I'm talking about investment in terms of time, in terms of your commitment, in terms of putting at the back of your mind consciousness of the kind of environment you find yourself. So we need to invest our time. We need to invest for a wonderful time to make sure our environment is so much conducive. Because if we don't do that, then we are going to face the consequences, not only us, our upcoming generation. So how do we start to, bring all stakeholders together to make sure that everybody is involved? Everybody is taking one or two roles in developing our city, in making sure that we are planning, we are putting a structure, a project management structure to develop and to sustain the process of how we need to ensure our environment is aligned to the kind of community we find ourselves and the environment we want to see for the future of our generation. So it is very, very key that we put at the back of our mind the risk that comes with it. How do we collaborate? How do we build partnership to make sure that our city is just? And let me also share with you, if you are staying in a city that have a lot of cars, pollution, air pollution is also a very, very dangerous act that can make a city to suffer. Like I said, there are a lot of linkages when we talk about planning for a city, or when we talk about making our city sustainable. There are a lot of things that we need to look into, because if we don't talk about them, then how do we have knowledge? How do we transfer knowledge? How do we build a solution that is going to turn around the kind of city we want to find ourselves? A lot of us, our government, even geographers are not talking about how we can strengthen our early warning system. You know, we need to look into that because information is key. How do we disseminate information for people across our city to understand the period, the time that we need to take action? This is very, very key. And I want us to look into that for us, majorly staying in vulnerable communities, even authorities that create all these actions. We need to put more zeal. We need to understand how to execute all this kind of opportunity that we see to make sure that we are in charge of taking care of our communities and our cities. How do we start building climate resilience infrastructure? You know, like I said, climate change is not a joke. When you are in primary school, when you are in a room and there's air condition, when they off the air condition, what happens to your mood? Everything change, the environment change. So in a twinkle of an eye, anything that changes an environment is like something has taken away from nature that we need to quickly look at, so that when it's taken away, we need to look for a way to make sure that it's not affecting the people. And that's why we need to start building that resilience infrastructure that can help us to have a free flow of movement. Are we talking about our roads? Are we talking about our buildings? Are we talking about the bridges that we build across different cities? Are we considering how we can make sure that we give our infrastructure a sustainable, or let me call it a future impact, that we build resilience for us? How do we make sure that we set a goal for this sea level rise we are finding ourselves into? What goals are we putting in place to meet the sea level rise, the flooding, the oil spillage, desert encroachment, desertification in every aspect that we find ourselves across Africa? How do we make sure we build climate resilience? Because infrastructure is key in building a future that is sustainable for the people and the planet. How do we encourage, like I was talking about air pollution, transportation? How do we start looking at a way whereby we can build a future transport for Africa that will promote, sustainable transportation, that will promote different options for our transportation programs? Even though some cities are not well planned. I was recently in Kenya and I can see some improvements, though we still need more. A lot of people want to cycle. A lot of people want to walk. A lot of people are looking to pair up by taking the same transport across the road. But the risk is also pulling people back to do all these things. Why? Because the city is not well planned. Can I walk on Tomiland Bridge for Nigerians? Can I say I want to create an atmosphere that is clean for the people, and I start cycling on Tomiland in the midnight? Where even the street light cannot save you, cannot give you a security that is secured. And this happened in other cities across Africa. It's very, very important that we look how many of us have pedestrian bridge. I was in Kenya. People leave pedestrian bridge and start crossing the road. The city is planned to use pedestrian to cross a bridge or to cross an highway. But most of us, because of we are too hurried to move. And these are the little things that we need to be mindful of when we are building a city that must just, when we are planning for a climate resilient city across Africa. So it is very, very key that we put all this in mind. Our conscious efforts, what we do indirectly, is also what is affecting our city that we find ourselves. So in the government angle, how do we strengthen governance? How do we look at our local authority? I was telling a couple of my friends some times ago that our local government have a lot of role to play in building resilience. Local government, maybe some country call it counties, some country call it local authorities, some people call it local chapter or something. But how can we build a governance from bottom approach? Because these are the people that are closer to the people in the grassroots. How do we talk about building capacity and making these people to understand that we need to strengthen our governance in building a local or a sustainable planning for the future? You see, how do we train our city planners? What is their efforts that we can put in place to make sure that climate adaptation and mitigation strategy works for Africa? How do we foster collaboration between local government, federal, civil society, and stakeholders across the value chain? These are key factors that we need to look into if we really want to study our environment, study our city, and study the kind of academic we are giving to people. And let me tell you, academicians are not left behind. How do we make use of their research to build a city, to implement policies, and to regulate actions that can enforce climate action? So it's very, very important. And for most of us that are staying, let me say, in the eastern part of Africa, we see a lot of climate-related projects, actions that is going on in East Africa. We need to capitalize on those opportunities. Some cities are really talking much about rebuilding or replanning, but what are we talking about in our own local entity? Is very, very key. It's very, very, very key. In anywhere you find yourself, is either in Zambia, is either in South Africa, is either in Ghana, is either in Somalia, is either in Sudan, we are all in the same boat. And this boat, as it's taking us in a direction that we are looking for solution, we need to be committed to make sure that we raise awareness. We put more pressure on public participation so that we'll be able to engage our local communities and raise awareness about the impact of climate change. And not only that, so that we can encourage public participation in all levels of decision-making processes. This is very, very key, because building a city, it doesn't take a day. Building a city takes processes. And if we don't understand the concept of sustainability, then we cannot build a city that is just. How do we involve ourselves in promoting social justice? How do we improve ourselves in promoting climate justice? How do we talk about environmental justice for people that are living in the affected communities? How do we ensure that we produce, a facility? We facilitate a facility that is fair and just for the goods of the people. These are the things that we need to look into. It's very, very key, guys. And I don't want to take much of our time because most of you know about all these things, but we need to just remind ourselves that our conscious efforts, is what we need to drive a sustainable planning for our city. Because if you and I don't put that zeal, that commitment into this, then nothing can happen or nothing can change. A lot of cities, we are talking about transiting from fossil fuel to renewable energy in a city that have not experienced some benefit of sustainable planning city. How do we start talking about investing in energy or in renewable energy for Africa? Africa is well, planned. But what happens to the people that rule us, that are scared to transit to renewable energy sources, that are scared to start looking at how we can make investment in our solar, in our wind, to see how we can use it to reduce the dependency on fossil fuel? How many? And we are talking about building a city. We are talking about planning for a sustainable city. across Africa? How do you and I start looking at how can we decrease greenhouse gas emission? Hello, my brothers. Africa is at the verge or at the edge of this impact. And if we don't establish, a favorable policy, if we don't establish a regulation that will promote all this adoption of renewable energy, then we are joking with the life of our unborn children, even our life on earth. How do we conduct a comprehensive analysis or comprehensive assessment of the kind of city vulnerability that we are living? It's very key for us to start looking at how we identify the most vulnerable population. And I'm saying that because a lot of countries have done this day in, day out. We've come up with Paris Agreement. We've come up with Kyoto Protocol. We've come up with a lot of diverse agreements concerning people that are not part of the planet. So how do we identify the most vulnerable population, including the poor living in informal settlements? How do we intensify our efforts as even the civil society to complement the effort of the government? City planning is very, very key, and we need to start looking at. And as we're talking about, we are looking at the opportunities that when we build a green space for people, there are a lot of opportunities that come with it. Clean air, sustainable living, road channel being very nice, where you take 1.5 hours to, you take 30 minutes to the place, building an infrastructure that is just, open more investment for people to grow businesses that is climate inclined. It's very, very key, because our economic development lies in the space that we find ourselves on climate-related issues. If we don't build our climate resilience, our economic development will suffer. If we don't carry people along in building resilience, our environment, our economy, and the future of our people will be jeopardized of this opportunity. So, and like I said, a lot of us in different countries have seen the rapid urban expected to continue in the rapid flooding that we see in our different cities. Some people predicted our rain will stop so period. Some people predicted our rain will do this, but you know what? Why can't we focus on planning? Why can't we focus on, resilience program? Why can't we focus on how we can build our city and be ready for the disaster that might come? We call it disaster risk reduction. It's very, very key. My brothers, my sisters, it's high time for us to start looking at cities that we can learn from. Cities that have come up with city planning. I know that many of us on this call have heard about C40s, what they are doing across countries to make sure that they build resilience, to make sure that communities understand the problem that we are facing. It's high time. South Africa is done that. Accra have done that. When will your country, when will your government identify the solution for our city planning? How do we make sure that government officials are part of this? The city planners, the urban planner, the woles, that's what we call it in Nigeria, the developers, the academians. How do we get them ready? How do we, civil society comes together to play a critical role? Most importantly, how do we have the private sector? How do we make sure that communities, members are also part of this conversation? My fellow brothers, it is high time for us to start looking at what are the beautiful solutions, what are the sustainable solutions to move on with. My fellow brothers and sisters, it is very, very key for us that nobody should be left behind. And everybody must be part of this strategy, must be part of this implementation. Is key to do this. Let's also dive into a little bit of what we need to start looking at to attract for a city planning, for planning for a city that is just. We need to start looking at green buildings. How do we invest in that? When you want to invest your money, look at sustainable buildings. How can we like mention about the public transportation? How do we look in that to build a city that is just for everybody? How do we make sure that our waste is not, a mentor will say, waste is not waste until we waste it. Every waste is an investment. Some waste is money for people. How do we make sure we talk about waste to energy to build a city that is just? How do we encourage cities to reduce, reuse, and recycle? How can we make sure that this help them to contribute to a cleaner environment? How do we create a green space for everybody? How do we design something that improve air quality, that provide recreational spaces, that also serve as habitat for our local biodiversity? Because everything will be affected if we don't build resilience or sustainable planning for our city. How do we start looking at what I mentioned the other time, embracing renewable energy that can help us to reduce resilience, on fossil fuel? That can make us to help us to reduce our dependency on fossil fuel. And across the value chain, is going to reduce and lower the greenhouse gas emission that we see across our continent. How do we build collaboration between Northern Africa, Southern Africa, Eastern Africa, Western Africa, Central Africa, to make sure that we are working in hand, we are planning together, we are building a project that will develop our cities. We understand the project management aspect, we understand the investment aspect, we understand to make sure that the environment will be conducive for us to excel in businesses that is just and clean. We need to start looking at how can we encourage our urban agriculture? How do we make sure agriculture is attractive to people? Because when you talk about agriculture, we talk about green space, we need things that can make the space more attractive, that can make our environment more, conducive. How do we promote diverse opportunity in our agriculture system? Because a city that doesn't have, a community gardens that can put fresh opportunity or fresh air or clean air to us, that community is going to suffer for long. How do we make our government accountable? How do we engage our local communities to make sure that businesses, residents, community organizations are all part of this implementation of a city that we want to see ourselves into? How do we continue to prioritize awareness and education, which is very, very key for individuals to also make, informed decision and capacity contribution to sustainable city development across Africa? Most of us don't want to build our capacity when it comes to knowledge. How do we get knowledge transfer? It's very, very key. International body, different investors. How do we make sure that we seek their interest in partnership and investment? Because the valuable experts, the funding opportunity, and resource to support sustainable initiative lies within our community, lies within ourselves. But for us to build that city, we need to make that work so that we can have a just city for all. Let us remember, everything or every stop is very, very key. And I want to end on this note, because I know all of us, we already have a lot of conversation But before I end with my notes, I want to bring you a perspective of how countries make decisions for people without engaging them. So it's a very good example. Any of us know about the Paris Agreement? When the Paris Agreement was signed with a lot of content and components, how many of us were part of the engagement in your country level to sit and have this conversation to, okay, this is what we are speaking on our behalf? How many of us have picked the climate change policy of your country, have read it in and out to understand what the climate change policy is all about? How many of us have taken stock of incidents that is happening to us as a city, as a country, to leverage on building a project that will solve that? You know, there's a climate resilience strategy that a lot of countries have developed. Ethiopia have it. How do we make sure that all of us, we invest in learning and reading so that when we want to make an argument for building a project, we'll be able to have something to say? So it is very, very key that we start looking at this. We need to set a future for ourselves. We need to set a specific goal and target for our communities, that this is what we want to see, this is what we want to see in our city in the nearest future. So my fellow brothers and sisters, my fellow colleagues, it is high time for us to see that we keep in mind that any action taken towards sustainability is better than none, and that a concerned effort is required to construct a sustainable city in Africa. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. A lot has been said already. I want to say a big thank you to our facilitator, Mr. Olumide. Yes, please just go ahead. Go ahead. So right now we'll be giving, so because I know that you can't just wait to be on this session. Giving a few of us the opportunity to share our learnings. We will still get to the question and answers. But if you have an experience that is relatable to to what Mr. Olumide has shared, he has shared a lot of things from the way we adapt our infrastructure, to the realities of climate change, to our personal life, to policy, formulation, and a whole lot has been, said. And I will still want to emphasize that one way that you can ensure that you get something from this sort of lecture and this teaching and this conversation is that have a place that you're jotting down these points. And you can do it right now. Just go on social media, share your learnings, tag the facilitator, tag ACL's initiative, and use your official hashtag, so that it gets more visible. So if you have a specific question or a comment to what Mr. Olumide has said, please just indicate by a raise of hands. I'll allow I'll give us 30 seconds to do that. But while we are still coming up with, we are still waiting for people to speak. So something as always, and I have a lot of arguments. So of course, I work across different sectors, including sexual and reproductive health. And one of the arguments has been that about population. So, and you hear UNFPA and some of the stakeholders that are in charge or whose work is on family planning, say a lot about this. And there's arguments for and against. So my question is, does the African population, of course, I think Africa is around like a billion. Does the African population do you think is a major contributor to climate change in Africa? So does our population in Africa somehow impair our ability to tackle climate change? So that is a question for you, sir. There are 4 people on the that have been indicated okay to want to speak. We have Rhoda Mungina, Olaide, Smith, and a lot. So I'll be giving us 1 minute to give a comment or ask your question. So let's start with Rhoda Mungina. Good morning, Rhoda.
Good afternoon
Oh,
from
yeah.
Kenya.
Yeah, it's afternoon in Kenya. I keep
Yes.
forgetting. I
Oh,
keep
it's
forgetting East Africa. Yes, please go on. You have 1 minute.
Hi, Mr. Climate. I think this is the second time we are meeting. We met during the International Labour Organization training on just transition. And there's something that I've noted that we keep talking about. And I think as Africans, we haven't really defined what just transition is for us. And also, when you're looking at the cities, the investments of sustainable or environmental sustainability, we are still lagging behind, because you find that most of the urban areas, they are overpopulated. And I think there is a study that says by 2030 we will be having overpopulation in the urban cities. And I think that is one of the major I would say challenge that we have when it comes to pushing for the green initiative in the urban areas. Now, how can we go about it? Because you find that some of the overpopulation, the overpopulation in the urban areas is a challenge, as you find that most of the high-rise buildings that are coming up are not environmental sustainable, because you find that some of the sewage lines or the sewage systems that are in those places are becoming a problem, especially during the rainy season. So how do we go about sensitizing the leaders to understand that in certain areas there is certain initiatives that need to take place? Because like Kenya, we have a very huge challenge of our leaders understanding the importance of climate change, and also how do we go about the urban areas, and how do we push for the urban areas to be um, environmentally sustainable? Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. So I don't know. Do you want to take the question one after the other, or we
Let me
allow everyone
respond.
to speak? Okay.
Let me respond to the two, yours and his own. Yeah, thank you very much. The first question that says that does African population a major contributor or contribution to climate change? To be very sincere with you, when it comes to climate change, it is important to note that the impact is not solely, attributed to any particular population or region. That one, we should have that at the back of our mind. And climate change is a complex issue. A lot of people know that, and that influenced by different or various factors. And those factors are the factors that we need to talk about, which are the population growth, industrial activities, deforestation, which I mentioned the last time, greenhouse gas emission, and among others. These are the things that we need to start looking at, because while it is true that Africa has a rapid growth population, it is also essential to do what? To consider the overall contribution of climate change, which everybody knows about, that we are less contributor. But the bottom line is, how do we as a country, as an African continent, try to look at those issues and leverage our local resources to support this action? Industrialized countries have also, historically been responsible for a lot of significant portion of all these issues that we find ourselves. So we can't just say that because we are more vulnerable, that they are not also vulnerable. But it's important to acknowledge that everyone, regardless of, the kind of location that I've mentioned, or regardless of the role that we play, we need to address this climate change in our local way, because the way climate change is affecting me might be a little bit different the way it's affecting you, but the bottom line is that we are all affected by the issue of climate change. And so our focus should be on how do we build collaborative efforts, to pursue a sustainable practices for both the developed and the developing country. And this should be looking at how do we reduce our the GHG emission, how do we start promoting renewable energy sources, and how do we start looking at how can we foster environmental conservation? Because everybody, like I said, it doesn't leave anybody behind. It affects us in different ways, but in the same boat. Like I mentioned, we are all in the same boat. Same boat. Like you are just in a Titanic boat. You remember, anybody that remember that movie? We are in the same boat that when anything happens, it affects everybody. So how do we now make sure that we drive out, we suck out the ones that is affecting Africa? It is when we build a collaborative effort to pursue a sustainable practices in our own space. And we need to start asking ourselves, how can we create a more sustainable future for everyone in the environment? The bottom line is, we keep saying this every time, but little efforts, little action in our own local area will drive a change. If you and I can start, then a lot of people can change their mentality on it. And the key thing is that attitudinal change is very, very key. When I started about, I said, if you are a climate denier, then you are still facing a long way to go to understand that climate change is real and climate change is affecting everybody. So the second, my sister that talks about just transition, just transition has been a conversation that the deniers used to tackle front and back. Number one, for Africa, the idea of ensuring a fair and equitable shift towards a more sustainable and low carbon economy in the continent is what we need to focus on, which includes all this issue of social economy, includes environmental challenges, on how we can transit away from fossil fuel and towards renewable energy assets. Some days, yesterday, day before yesterday, we see a walk across the world where a lot of people are talking about moving from fossil fuel to renewable energy. Even at the General Assembly, they're also talking about it. Even at the last conference, the African Climate Week, we had a conversation of why do we continue to depend on fossil fuel? But now the conversation for Africa should now start looking at how do we, take into account the specific needs and the circumstances of the continent that includes diverse economy. We have diverse economy in Africa. How do we start leveraging on those are diverse economy, build an energy system and socioeconomic condition that is affecting us? So we need to look at that. And when we are talking about solution, most of us don't look at the opportunity that ties with those solutions, because some opportunities can make people to change their mind and go into businesses that is just and green. So we need to start looking at our social equity and inclusivity in the area of our vulnerable communities. We need to start talking more about renewable energy. Even though people say that, are we really ready for renewable energy? Are we really ready for solar? Are we really ready for wind? Let me tell you, it takes a step to build a sustainable future for Africa and to build a city that will just for Africa. How many of us in Africa, we are looking at talking about technological transfer? We have countries in Africa that are already talking about technological transfer. How do we make sure that we leverage on the experiences of those countries? How do we, let me quickly say this, our local resources, how do we invest in it to build a future for ourselves? It is very important. Climate resilience and adaptation. So my sister, just transition. Let us intensify our efforts to start building local resources, local actions, local conversation, so that a just transition for Africa will be able to be recognized and we'll be able to leverage to foster a future, that where our economy will grow, where our social well-being will develop, and environmental sustainability can now go ahead hand in hand, and our leaders will now see the zeal of the citizen that we need change. Not only change that will last forever, that will build a city that will be conducive for their own great-grandchildren and our upcoming generation. So just transition is a collective effort. Just transition must ensure a fair and equitable opportunity for all. So don't let us blame the developed country. Let us look inwardly. While we are pushing them to stop polluting, let us start pushing ourselves to stop using local product that is affecting our environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I very well agree with your last point, as you're trying to let's do more before you can win your leaders over, let it be a way of life for you. There's more effectiveness, or our action will be effective, our drive will be effective if we act rather than just talk, right? If we make it a lifestyle, and your leaders can see that it works, like in the previous session, we've been able to see that. Why don't you show them that this your idea works, that this way of life works? So I'm speaking in respect of convincing your political leaders, getting them involved in this fight. We need to do more of the action, and they would see that indeed that we're serious about it. The next person that will be given the mic to is Olumide. So thank you very much, brother. I hope your question has been answered. So Olumide, so 1 minute, please, so that we have enough time to take other people's comments. Hi, Olumide. Good afternoon. It's afternoon already. I know you're in Nigeria.
I want Japan to Japan. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Plami, and congratulations for your award on Saturday.
Yeah.
Well done. So, quick one. As you understand that since we've not been, our inability to select the right leader, we are not in the same phase with reality of things. Now, the approach should then be that, and thank you for what you are doing with Osun State government. So, I want to ask, if private, you've encouraged us that we should take initiative where government attention will be called into what non-profit and private sector is doing, so that they can begin to take initiative. So I want to ask, like the projects, as in the policy you are helping Osun State government to develop, is this something that is in public, or can we then begin to look at adopting what has been done somewhere else if we have access to those policy documents, so that with that we can begin to engage the people that are in government for hoping that they begin to adopt things and things will get better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Olumide. And I love that question, because it's actually very specific. Mr. Olumide, of course, works across sectors and with the government, and so this question will really be it works for each and every one of us that want to have a say in how policies are formed, essentially.
Hello.
What you say?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Let me quickly put this on record that we are all together in this game. So saying that I work for government, no, it's just a privilege that most of us were open to learning. And let me quickly encourage us as friends, brothers and sisters on this call, that please let us invest in our knowledge, like reading, trying to understand what the government is doing, because I'm not speaking for the government. I'm just trying to let you know that I've been able to understand that some documents are actually available, but we don't even ask for it. For instance, I know anybody on this call in your country, do you have a climate change policy? And I'm sure some country has a climate change policy. How many of us have been able to, write a request to get the climate change policy for them to read? Lagos State has a climate change policy, I think on, and how many of us that my friends here staying in Lagos have seen the climate change policy for Lagos State? How many of us have written a request to the ministry that they need this policy to influence their work? Because let me tell you one biggest strategy that we need to quickly understand. When you pick a policy document and you digest those policy documents, you don't now need to go and look for how you can profile solution. You can use that policy document to drive out solution that you want to go into. Because the policy is there to guide. The policy is there to tell us what is happening. The policy is there to make us to develop an advocacy, to drive community understanding. So my first way of saying this is that if you are staying in any city, if you are in Nairobi, if you are in Limuru County, any county you find yourself, or you are staying in Zambia, in any city you find yourself, write to your government. It might not be easy, but let us start. So many people have been written to government to hear government's view on certain issues, certain problems. How many of us have set up a meeting with the government to understand why flooding continues to affect our cities? We need to start doing some sort of things, because most times these government people don't really have much time, which they're supposed to do. And I'm not saying that, yes, I'm also blaming them in their responsibility in taking action in the community. But we as a civil society, we as young people, we can set a channel between the government and the community. And when you go to community, sometimes you'll be able to understand, this community people even understand climate change, but the way we are saying it is totally different, or the way they are understanding it is different. And you'll be able to drive more understanding by getting their challenges and by building solutions to the problem together. But government is very hard to work with. But we just need, as a young people, to be proactive, to understand the issue, so that we'll be able to engage them in a way whereby they will listen to us and they will give us the opportunity to share our knowledge and to share the kind of outcome and the support we want to give to the government. Thank you.
Right. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. So that was from Olumide, asking about how we can work, with the government, and appropriate response is being given. So let's hear from Smith with his question. Please, if you have further questions, you can drop them in the Q&A.
Oh.
Yes, Mr. Smith. Good afternoon,
Yeah,
sir.
and Mr. Climate, good to connect with you. Good to meet you, Mr. Olumide. Awesome presentation. So just quickly, my question is, how do we, incorporate the private sector and communal members? How do we incorporate both of them to ensure that we gain a sustainable living and a green environment? Because most times it's like the private people are this way, government is this way, the community members are this other way. So the understanding is not even the same among these various sectors. So how do we ensure that we have a common understanding, and then we face the fight against climate change and bring a lasting solution to this, so that our cities become greener and better for a sustainable living among ourselves? Thank you. And just to add, sir, I think we need to learn how to write FOI. That is to complement what Mr. Olumide has been saying. We really need to learn how to write FOI. That will help us to, engage policymakers. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you very much for that. FOI is very, very important. It's very, very important. But quickly, you see, the role of private sector is very key. And if you look at our private sectors now, maybe you people can go and read about one of the articles I wrote on the green tax. Maybe I will look for it and share it with you guys. The private sector have huge role to play. But the reason why I don't want to talk much on the private sector is because there are still a lot of issues that we are having with the private sector. Why? Because the role of the government, or the kind of partnership government is building with the private sector, is not that well elaborated for people to understand how to engage them. Every private sector is looking at sustainability, but the kind of sustainability they're putting at our face is not reflecting to the solution that we find ourselves in the community. So it is high time for us to have some sort of government intervention in making sure that when you put out 10, then when you are taking back, you make sure you put more than 10. So it is very important that private sector also understand their role in this conversation, because it's only when private sector understand what is involved that they'll be able to build supports, for the community. And I don't want to mention companies here, but I just want to let us know that the private sector are actually doing lots. But how do you want to measure their impact? How do you want to make sure that all what they are doing is also having a solution that can transform the mindset of the people in the community that are actually at the receiving end? So let's engage private sector in a way whereby we want to understand what is how do they measure their impact? How do they be able to say they want to measure what they are doing to the community by creating a lasting or long-lasting solution to the environment space we find ourselves? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. So we'll take the last question from Sally Hassan. So let me just Mr. Sally Hassan, in 1 minute. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Shobo, and good afternoon, everyone. Once again, my name is Saleh Hassan. I'm from Nigeria, northeastern part of the country. Hello?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. When it comes to climate change planning and implementation, we locally, we all have some plans or proposals in our jurisdiction. But what is most affecting our implementation process in most of the time is issue of funding. Locally, we are living in an environment where we have a large number of poor people per se, and then you may come with a very good plan or an initiative, for instance, a climate change issue initiative, but implementation process, if you want to invite or inject people or community into that program, definitely you need to have a concrete and suitable program in line with their culture and in line with their aspiration. Because, for instance, now in our area, northeastern part of the country, we have experienced a lot of availability of non-governmental organizations since that we find ourselves in an insurgent situation. So most of the time, if you call people for a certain initiative, for instance, for this climate change issue, people, it is going to be a very difficult for people to even participate, because their anticipation sometimes is to give them something instead of coming together to listen and to have a knowledge, so that locally how to go about this changing in climate change. So my question here is, the problem we are facing is a matter of funding in most of the cases. If not, we have plans and programs available within our community, but funding is a major issue. Thank you very much. I saw it.
Right.
I don't know if I captured the question very well. Is it talking about getting funding support for local actions?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
So I will say that number one, when you talk about funding, please try to understand that funding is not about the kind of impact you want to make. For funding is about what have you done that people can come and support you with. So funding for local actions comes from you already create a platform that is, attracting solution. So because everybody in this world, both the poor, the old, the young, need funding for one or two things. So for you to get that, we need to first of all have a local actions that we are doing. Try to research on local grants, try to look at crowdfunding platforms, try to look at corporate sponsorship, local fundraising events. Government funding programs are also available. And remember, all these funding mechanisms I've mentioned need to tie in line with the kind of programs and action you are developing. And let me tell you, if you have a good response action, or you have a good collaboration with your local communities, it's going to ease you of building solutions in that space. And the kind of example is what I do. Number one, when I go for meetings, I talk about my solutions. I leave the challenges alone. When I go for meetings, I speak to people that matters a lot. People that are looking at climate adaptation, people that are looking at resilience actions. Another thing again is that we need to give ourselves a room for learning and to understand and to be able to give solutions to issues that we see across the value chain. So my brother, I feel I see where you're coming from, because most of us have been frustrated because we keep applying and nothing is coming. But let me tell you, it's working for some people because they've put in a strategy of how to understand the process. So we all need to understand the process to drive solution within our community. It might be that you are writing funding for bigger grants rather than starting from somewhere that can continue to build your financial capacity. So it's very, very key. We look into that. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So that question was from Sally. So that's about funding. So funding, starting from low-hanging fruits. We also mentioned the need to have been doing something on your own. You are not just presenting problems, but you are actually presenting solutions. So those your solutions will attract the much needed funding. So let me take the last person with regards to the question and answer, and it's actually because it's from a lady. We've not heard any female voice. Oh, okay. I think heard from Rhoda Mongina. But let me allow Ruby to ask a question. Ruby, you have 1 minute. Are you able to unmute your mic? Hello,
Good
Ruby.
afternoon. Hi, Shobo. Good morning.
Yeah. Welcome again.
Let me go ahead. I do agree with Mr. Climate. Thank you so much for giving quite an insightful presentation and giving us ways in which we can participate as youths and calling on our governments in order to collaborate with them and speak with them. Because, I mean, without our programs being integrated with government, I think as youth, we won't be able to see the impact that we want to see because our programs are not in line with government and we will not get support from the government. And just to contribute, there was a question that was put across to say private sector is important when it comes to the fight for climate change because one, they are part of the community. They have a core value, which is their corporate social responsibility to be able to assist communities in which they work in and provide in. But it's unfortunately that some contracts are not so much in line with community developments, and which brings it a very huge challenge when it comes to tackling climate change or climate activities around communities when you talk of private sector. And I think we as youth have a huge role to play. And when we have platforms like this and we're able to share ideas, we're able to grow and enlighten each other on best solution and ways we can be able to tackle climate change and climate adaptation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hello.
Oh, yeah, I was muted. I didn't even realize.
That was just a
Yeah.
contribution, right?
Yes, that was the contribution, not the question really. So thank you very much, Ruby. So I'm going through the Q&A right now. Some of us have asked questions. So let me see this question from Olatunji Oluwaseun. So Tunji is asking, what specific steps would you advise us to take to address issues stated so far, most especially the issue of government nonchalant attitude towards this crime? What specific steps would you advise us to take to address the issues that has been mentioned so far, most especially the issue of government's nonchalant attitude towards this crime? That was a question from Tunji Luashion. Yeah, hello, sir. Yeah, hello, Olumide.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, okay.
Sorry,
So you're audible.
I muted my other side. So I think we've already mentioned
that. Yeah.
we've already mentioned a lot of this. Number one, you need to be very, very close to understand what the government is doing. And what are the things that we need to do are very, very simple. Start from within ourselves, from where we stay now. Because you and I are also government. It's just that we don't make decisions. So how do we research on city planning processes? Because we are talking about climate change and planning of our cities in Africa. How do we talk about, you need to do a research. And doing that research, you need to move closer to the government to understand why things are not working. We need to identify relevant government bodies. It's very, very key. What body is involved in city planning, in climate change, in agriculture, in biodiversity, any area you want to speak on, you need to identify that government that is involved. You know, we as young people, we need to identify kind of groups or communities that we want to make an intervention or that we want to work with, so that community also have a government. We call it in Nigeria, we call it civil community development association. Then we also have the local government. We also have the councillor. These are level of government that we need to start, first of all, talk with, based on what we need to build a relationship with these people. They call local officials. We need to build a good relationship with them so that we'll be able to drive innovation, we're able to drive conversation, and government will know you. Let government know you. Let them know what you are doing. Let them know what you are capable of. Then you'll be able to educate each other. They'll be able to have leverage on what they're. And most of the time, when the government knows you very well, they invite you to their planning meeting, their opening hearings. That is where you can make cases. One thing is that when you make points in engaging government, my brothers and sisters, you've solved your own personal problem 50%. Then the remaining 50% is now to take what they are talking about and go and look for a way you can package and develop something in that community you find yourself to make change. It's very, very important. Let's keep on advocating for sustainable ideas. and the government will see what you are talking about. Create partnership, create collaboration, seek partnership as well from different youth networks, from different government, from different private sector. Create partnership with them. And most importantly, let us try and monitor, evaluate every single step we are working on, so that we are not just talking, we'll be able to hold our government accountable for their commitment and even continue to advocate for our community interest. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, sir. Thank you for that response. A question through comment from Lisa, Lisa Ayo. So Lisa is saying that how can we advocate for implementation of effective strategies and mechanisms to ensure sustainable physical planning and development, even in the presence of corruption within the government and regulatory body. So she goes on to say that sustainable development plans are shelved because cartels run the private development sector and put up buildings and structures everywhere in Kenya. Most of our green spaces are being grabbed at high rates. In Kenya, we are not only experiencing extreme deforestation, but also our rivers and dams are getting highly silted due to lack of catchment land use management. Yeah, so that was from Lisa, and I think for a vast majority of us, it's an issue that we continue to talk about. That so when disasters happen and when there's flooding and all of these issues, especially in the urban centers, you begin to ask yourself that how does so many breach of the law of state codes happen while the government is still in place? And I think Mr. Olumide can speak to that that how do we advocate for the implementation of effective strategies and mechanisms to ensure sustainable fiscal planning and development, while you are still talking about corruption. So how do we achieve sustainable fiscal planning and development in the midst of the corruption from within our government and the regulatory bodies?
All right.
Is there a way around that?
All right, thank you very much. I think I'm a little bit going academical today because I'm a lecturer. But one thing I will say, my sister from Kenya, thank you for that good question. It happens everywhere, land grabbing and everything. But what you can start advocating for is accountability and transparency. Is very, very key in every aspect. And before you can do that, you need to engage the local authorities. When I say local authority, not the government authorities now, but the local authorities. I don't know how it works in Kenya. There are community people that can, create an atmosphere for you to work with them and help them to amplify their voices. We need to start strengthening those kind of efforts, those kind of measures we see on the grassroots, like coming together to speak one voice. We need to strengthen our voices against that. How are you creating an engagement with civil society organization that can put a petition, I can put a write-up to the sole government to see why the need for them to implement effective strategy for mechanism to ensure a sustainable physical planning works for the people. You need to start building capacity of people to understand these issues because we are creating an advocacy that can help them. If it's possible, you bring in international support, international collaboration, advocate for international support and collaborate with some corruption bodies that can help you to look at the critical conversation of this and put it in a well format so that government will see that you people are not just talking, but you are talking from points of experience. So it's something that we have been talking about day in, day out. But let me tell you, we should not stop talking about it because one day, one or two leaders will listen and there will be change. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for the response. So let me see if there are other questions. we have so let me allow someone else to speak. I'm assuming Alima has a question. So let me allow Alima to talk. Yeah, good afternoon, Alima. Do you have a question or comments?
Good afternoon, sir.
Okay, good afternoon.
Yes, I'm Halima Akaje from Nigeria. I just have a contribution, sir, on the topic that is being discussed. In my own opinion, I think the fact is government is trying, government is making efforts about climate change, mitigation, and all that in Nigeria. I'm from Nigeria, so I'm speaking about, my point of view will be from Nigeria. But the fact is, because of the fact that Nigeria is a developing country, and there is always issue of balancing development with sustainability. So at times, governments will make decisions that sometimes we favor development, even at the detriment of the environment or the climate. But I think another way that we can enhance that is that non-governmental organizations, public-spirited persons, activists can also help in protecting the environment and climate by pressurizing governments, one. Two, they can also come by way of litigation, that's public interest litigation. And by that, courts can compel governments to discharge their obligations, their statutory obligations, as provided by extant laws or as expected based on the policies they've put in place. So pressure groups too can also assist in compelling government to honor their obligations as stipulated in extant laws that relate to environmental protection and climate change in Nigeria. That's my own contribution. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Alimat. I mean, well said. There's no other reason again. I mean, there's nothing more I can say to that. So Alimat has also portrayed some of the things that have been, said, that on our own, there are things that we can do, right, in addition to what Olumide has mentioned, on how to hold our governments accountable. And that was well said. So another question is from Cindy. Cindy, I'm sure it's from Zambia. So Cindy is asking, how can rural communities build resilience and adapt to climate change, considering the fact that climate change finance is usually prioritized for urban areas? How can rural communities build resilience and adapt to climate change, considering the fact that climate change finance is usually prioritized for urban areas? Is there any plan for rural communities? How can rural communities become more resilient or build resilience against in the face of climate change?
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me all?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So let me quickly respond to that in a very simple way. Number one, how, like I said, our communities, we need to start looking at how do we talk more on nature-based solution. How many of our communities have understand, because these people are actually living on local action. So how do we promote the use of nature-based solution for our communities? How do we start looking at assessing climate financing? For us to assess climate finance, then we need to support rural communities in assessing climate financing sources, because we are the bridge between the gap of the government and this community, and they don't know where these financial mechanisms are. So we need to help them to assess climate finance. Then we need to start helping this community as well to look at how do they advocate for policy engagement. We've mentioned that there are a lot of policies, but how many of us are engaging in policy engagement? We do, how do we build capacity and knowledge exchange? This can help our community to empower rural communities with necessary knowledge. And if we do this diligently, They will be able to encourage knowledge exchange platforms within the community where rural communities can learn from each other's and also access experts from different relevant organizations, which you and I can bridge the gap between them. Then we need to also look at how can we, build a community-based climate change adaptation. There must be some set of group, some set of team that can help to develop a community-owned climate change adaptation plan, so that these people will be able to know when to call, who to call, how to respond, the agency they need to speak with. It's very, very key for us to look at. Local participation is key. And we need to build, like I said, a network of climate relevant actions in the community so that all these people have their cluster to be able to respond to all these things. Community engagement is very, very deep. And if we don't, trade this space diligently, we will lose the solution we want to create. And we now turn to, you have to bring money before you help them to solve problem. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Also speaking to what Mr. Olumide has said, in some of for some of us, we had actually highlighted one of the points that was said about how we can help communities to become more resilient. Some of us had suggested in our project that rather than speaking in English all through, maybe we build a curriculum and we teach, we go to rural communities to teach climate change, effect of climate change, everything from investing, finance options, and all of that in the local language, in the language that the people in that region best understand, because they're actually vulnerable. A lot of things has been said also about nature-based solution. You'll be very surprised about what, for instance, our forefathers, the early settlers in our communities were able to do. I'm aware of some part of the Yoruba culture that monitors changing climate conditions and using something as elemental as trees, birds, animal cry, and all of that, and many of that. I think there are so many literature on on that. It just like Mr. Olumide said, we are the bridge between the government and the rural community. Thank you so much, sir. Abubakar Abdul Kader is asking if there are Nigerian policy documents on climate change. Please share with us Nigerian policy documents on climate change. Yes, it should be something I'm able to do. I also solicit with our facilitator. He gave some further readings. I'll also just solicit if he has access to these policy documents for our further reading. So that was from Abubakar Abdelkader. So the last comment is from Shedrack Agaki. Agaki is saying, I just want to make a comment. African cities were planned after the end of colonization and have not been redesigned. Can I agree more? For there to be a retort, there will be need for a system thinking approach. Unfortunately, we are having challenges in getting holistic approach to the challenges. In your view, how can we reshape the narrative to get system approaches integrated into new policy? So let me see if I can make sense of this question. In your view, how can we reshape the narrative to get system approaches integrated into new policy? So one thing is that I don't know if you got the question, sir.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Getting holistic approach to the challenge. In my own view, how can we reshape the narrative to get system approaches integrated in policies? Well, like I said, one thing is you need to find a way. Everybody keeps saying that the government is bad, government is bad. How many of us have been able to strive to make sure that, because policy is not your work, policies for the government make policies, we make the policies to be, how do we, so we need to start looking at how do we communicate the benefit of that policy to people? How do we build understanding of awareness? How do we engage stakeholders at early stage so that this policy we see can be able to, domesticated in the local context? How do we plot projects and, experimentation of activities that we see in the policy? It's very important. How do you provide support and resources? Because the support and resources we are providing is the conversation we are having with the local entity, with the local community. An African city that you said were planned after the end of colonization and have not been redesigned. Let me tell you, it is high time, and that is why climate change is affecting us today. Lagos State, as an example, have been doing a lot of redesigning, reconstructing this, to doing this, coming up with different campaigns on air pollution. And the funniest thing is that there's a consultancy from C40s. If you guys can check that, C40, they're doing a lot in Lagos State. But how do we make sure that all these efforts are being really localized, are being incorporated system thinking into our policy to attract training and education for people that want to understand the policy? How can we foster collaboration and indiscipline, dialogue to our aim, how to encourage sectorial collaboration? These are key, because when you look at policy, how many of us can analyze this policy? How many of us are good in policy advocacy? We have a long way to go. We have a long way in building awareness. We have a long way in communicating the benefit of the policy. We have a long way in incorporating the system thinking. We have a long way to go in order for us to provide support and resources. Resources can be when you are engaging the community on understanding of the process. And we need to start reshaping the narrative that we see that will help us to integrate the system approach into new policies required. What the policies we have now, presently, they have been developed by the state government, by the federal government, different countries. How do we make sure that we take this into new policy requirements, all this understanding, to make sure that we start highlighting the benefit, we start looking at how to foster collaboration to build more on the policy and localize it? How can we make it more holistic, as you said? So those things are things that we need to put in place. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. For those that have asked about where to find policy documents, I think one of the reliable areas, Nigeria has, Kenya has, and many of our countries, you can visit the UNFCCC website, and you would find it there. For someone that, for the Nigerian that asked about any policy, of any policy documents, for to Nigeria, you can check the WhatsApp group. Someone has posted or shared one of the documents, the Nigerian climate change policy. And there's another one again on the long-term vision, that is the 2050 vision, for the net zero targets. And there are so many of them like that. But for us, as a whole, irrespective of your country, just go to the UNFCCC websites. UNFCCC is the United Nations framework on framework convention on climate change, right? You would be able to get all of these documents there. I can also share the link to that. Shortly, I'll be sharing that. Does anyone have any other question? I think we have around 30 minutes, roughly around 30 minutes. Okay, so let me hear from, let me give Shedrack Agaki so 1 minute. Hi, Mr. Shedrack.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So before you go, can we
thanks for
can we agree to 1 minute, because I know that you're a teacher
sorry?
too. I said before we go, can we agree to
Hello?
1 minute? Yes, I'm with you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So I was saying that, can we agree to 1 minute? So because I know that
that's
this
fine.
is also it's also your passion.
Yes, in fact, that's why why I sent in to asking the view of our presenter today, because essentially what we need to do is to create a narrative, and a narrative cannot be created by one person. A narrative is it's a conversation. Like now, how do we enhance the conversation within Africa about climate change and how systemic solutions should be? I mean, it's an obligation of all of us, those who are in the Zero Carbon Africa Impact Fellowship, to start having this conversation. We increase the frequency of this conversation. And my urge to my fellow colleagues in the fellowship is we need to spearhead the conversation. Let's talk about it as much as we can, so that we can make these issues public. Because once the issues become public, and this is what I'm insisting to everybody that I'm talking to, once we have all the issues that we are talking about, climate change being public issues, then it will be easier for public policies to be implemented. I've been working in Parliament for the last 10 years, and I can tell you there is no legislation that is going to come into Parliament if that issue has not been debated in the public, such that the policymakers look at it as a public interest issue. So, I mean, it's an urge and a comment to my colleagues, and thank you to the presenter for what he shared. We need this conversation moving. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Shedrack. And I also want to support what Shedrack has mentioned, because I observed that at least in the Kenyan group, there's been a lot of conversation about policies and I mean the legislature essentially. I mean, one of the things that you can take advantage of, or that would be of benefit to us within this short period, is that we can learn from ourselves. The essence of being in these groups is not for you essentially to just be in a group. Is to foster your networking, your social network, just grow your social networking across your country. And on the WhatsApp group, you're free to do that. On the Telegram group, if you have an organization and you need volunteers, you need someone to brainstorm with you, you have a grant that you want to write, you have a team, please feel free to take advantage of each and every one of us. We come from different backgrounds, we come from different, we have different expertise. For some of us, we've been long in the development space. For some of us, we've been operating in the private sector. We know how to harness this, fund. We know how to mobilize funds. We know how the private, man thinks, the investor thinks. I feel that we can do more. And with respect to conversation, let's keep having these conversations. I like the fact that in the Kenyan group, for instance, and I'll call them out, there's always something thought-provoking that is being dropped on the group. I want us to take a cue from this, and let's use this opportunity, the opportunity of the fellowship to, stir up our thoughts, learn from each other, and we'll be better for it. So thank you very much, Mr. Shedrack. Okay, so let me allow David speak, David and he will probably be the last person. Alima, please let us allow David speak. You could drop your comments. Hi.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Where
Thanks,
are you
Maiwa.
calling from? Yeah, you're welcome. Where are you coming from?
I'm Nigerian, but I'm calling from Rwanda. So I'm in the Rwanda group, but I'm Nigerian. My question is about the brilliant conversation that has been ongoing. Thanks, everyone. Just one question to Mr. Climate. What exactly do you think is the position of the people championing climate change, climate action in Nigeria on electric mobility? I was talking with some people from the NCCC, the Commission for, or the Council for National Climate Change, and it's not very clear to me that they have a framework just yet, right? Maybe it's something that is in the works, so it's just not, accessible to the particular people I spoke with a few weeks ago. But I was just trying to get an understanding, because compared to a country like Rwanda, it's a bit clearer. We know exactly what the goals are, and exactly what we're trying to work towards a bigger vision, right? So it's easier for people in the private sector like us to plug in. I was just wondering, do you have any insights on this, or perhaps it's something that is work in progress, and then we can potentially look for opportunities to collaborate with people like the NCCC? Yeah, just wanted to get your thoughts on that. Thanks.
Hello, sir. So I had a network glitch.
Hello,
David.
can you hear me?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Yes. Please go on.
Yes, thank you, Mr. David. That was very, very, it's a new conversation. I think if you follow the NCC very well now, that's the National Climate Change Council, the Climate Council, you'll be able to understand that they themselves, they are still putting themselves together. And this is the first time they are standing as an agency or as a council in Nigeria. But the conversation of the issue of this or electric vehicle or mobility that you're talking about, most of transportation, I will rather advise that if you need to put a case study out there, to reach out to Lagos State Ministry of Environment, because they've really done something around that. And I'm very sure I can link you up to the right person to talk to. But when it comes to Nigeria as a country, there's really no framework for now. Even the issue of carbon credit, carbon offsets, they are still working on a framework. So that what I just say is that they are still really not, the department or the council is still, putting themselves together to make sure that they can be able to meet the demand of the council. Then another way to approach this also, because a lot of people keep going to council, there is Department of Climate Change under the Federal Ministry of Environment. I think you also need to reach out to them, because this conversation is a new conversation that is starting. And with the story of having the new minister, we don't even have minister yet in the environment. We only have minister for state. So I will advise, if you want to take a little bit of case study of what some states are doing, I think you should reach out to Lagos State Ministry of Environment. And if you need an help to reach out to somebody that can give you an overview, then I will be able to link you up to, to further the conversation, and to also look at a channel and avenue or for investment or for partnership, which is very, very key in this conversation of climate space. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Olumide. I just sent you a request on LinkedIn, so perhaps we can talk a little bit more on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm really excited about this new connections being formed. And, just jumping on this again, we've always said that we're taking advantage, you being on the program allows you, the rare opportunity to have like a direct mentorship or a mentorship opportunity with the facilitator. So just go ahead, introduce yourself as a fellow on this program and ask your specific questions outside this environment, outside this forum. Let's leverage the opportunities that we have right now. And it's not just for the current course, right? You can still reach out to other facilitators, especially if you have an interest in their in their subject area, right? And seek for counsel, seek for some of these, supports, here and there. It's not just so as an NGO, as the development organization, as the private sector, a person. Some of our supports would be in terms of technical knowledge and providing materials, connections, and yes, I mean some might even involve you learning how to mobilize funds. I want to thank our facilitator again for being on this call. We are very, very close to end time on today's program. I want to say a very big thank you to Mr. Olumide. Thank you so much, sir, for providing insights and your time, most especially because I can imagine. And that was why when we started the call, I was asking where exactly you were, because I know you're always very busy. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you for honoring our invitation. Thank you so much. Please let's appreciate our facilitator. Let's keep sharing those emojis. I know we cannot physically clap, like we are in a physical place, but let's keep doing that. Let's appreciate the wisdom shared today and take these lessons. Don't forget to share your learnings on your groups and also on social media. Tag ACA Health Initiative on LinkedIn, AC Health on Instagram and Twitter. Use the official hashtag for the program, Zero Carbon Africa. Also, in all of this, please make sure you also tag the facilitator too. On LinkedIn, you can find our facilitator, by his name. If you type in Olumide Idowu, you'll be able to get that. And I can also share his other social media. I think that would be very helpful. So thank you everyone for being a part of today's session. Thursday is another day, like I would say, or like I always say, don't assume alone that Monday, that when you attend just one session, it does it. No live session is exactly the same. So I encourage us to also make it a day with us on Thursday. And invite just if you are in a group already on the program, let's awaken ourselves, let's invite ourselves, and yes, and it's going to be fine. Of course, we look for a way to share the attendance on the group and so I don't know, I think someone else wants to speak. But I hope it's not a question, because I think our facilitator just dropped off from the call. Vivian, do you have a specific question? Vivian, you can unmute your mic. Okay, so while we're still waiting for Vivian, quickly, I want to say something concerning the projects. Like some of us know, we've accepted or we received your project proposals, and we like what we see, although we still are the work in progress, essentially. You should be able to receive the review today. For those of us that need to adjust the costs, so we've also stated what exactly you should be working with. We know that the funding that is available is not up to anything. I'll speak in the kind of balance, or in the balance that we all understand. For the rest of the country, apart from Nigeria, we have around I think $90 to $100, which is not up to a lot. But we are also counting on your resourcefulness and your ability to leverage your networks, right, to be able to achieve your projects. For some of us, we can do more than. So in your reviews, you might notice that we might just say that, okay, limit the project to this activity. But if you really believe in that project, you can do more. You will not be penalized for that. So, but we would actually be counting on your ability to, to mobilize these resources by yourself within the time frame. Thank you very much, everyone. Expect to hear from us. We share the recordings for the session. So once it's ready, we'll share it. And the training material also will be shared. So I think that is enough information for today. If there are other things, you get them on the group. Thank you, everyone. Have a pleasant day. Have a fruitful week. God bless you all. Bye. Bye, 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 bye. Bye from me.